Welcome to Saturday Morning Retro, episode 34, a podcast focused on retro gaming and giving ourselves an excuse to play our collection. Before we start the show, we want to thank all of our wonderful fans who have supported us. And if you want to show support for the Rated G Network, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Rated G for Gamers. You can also find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads at Rated G for Gamers. And finally, please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. We appreciate all the love. I'm your host, Dave Rotino, and this is my co-host, Dan, the podcaster formerly known as Classic Robinson.
Salutations, man.
Salutations, Dan. Salutations. You know, I am so excited for today's episode because I'd say it at the top of the show, you know, we've already kind of talked about it a little bit, but I'm doing Fable today, Dan. That's my game.
Oh my God. It's one of those infamous games or even series that Dave loves to just, trash on. he just loves it. It's two things. If you don't know anything else about Dave, you should know this. It's two things. One, he loves everything Final Fantasy. Correct. Fantasy, anything.
Correct.
And he hates everything Fable. So you know what I think should happen? You know what I think should happen that won't happen? Instead of having the double F, we should have the triple F, okay? Just like Triple H, we should have the triple F. We should have a Final Fantasy Fable game. and see how Dave loves it or hates it.
I don't even know how that would go down. Look, it all depends on who develops it, right? we've seen co-developed. Well, sadly, that studio is not around anymore. But we'll get into that. And I'm gonna be fair, Dan. I'm just gonna say I'm gonna be fair. This isn't just a chance for me to, poop all over the Fable franchise, because a lot of people that put a lot of work into this game, into this franchise, into this series, and we know it's coming back somewhat soon. I guess in the next maybe 1 to 3 years, we're gonna get that new Fable game from Playground, I think, or Playground.
Hopefully,
game? Yeah.
Hopefully.
I mean, we got that trailer at E3, so Fable's in the zeitgeist, man. Fable's in the zeitgeist.
So. All right, Dave, we have an awesome show this month. Coming up, we're going to talk about the aforementioned Fable, the first game. Dave played the first game. I actually can't wait to hear his thoughts, his deep dive into Fable. Can't wait for that. And then I'm going to talk about pro wrestling for the NES, which, funny enough, I really forgot about this game. And this is a game that is big in my childhood because I'm of that era.
It's
but before we get,
it's a classic, according to a lot of people on the internet.
Yeah, but before we get into any of that stuff, we always start the show with this time in gaming history, and July 13th in 2017, not that long ago, Hey Pikmin came out. Now, Hey Pikmin was the first Pikmin game in the series that deviated from the traditional original Pikmin games, where it was more of a side-scrolling platformer.
Right.
Which I loved, by the way, but apparently people didn't love this game so much because it deviated completely from the original games. It's actually a game I want to do for Saturday Morning Retro to show it some love, because it is definitely not as bad as people said it was at the time. And I think it was just a negative sentiment because we were waiting for the new Pikmin game that didn't come out until later, and this wasn't what people wanted from the Pikmin series, because they wanted a new Pikmin game at the time.
I never played it, so I don't know.
I got it when it first came out, and I played it. And I think we talked about it on the show early on when we first started the show. And I loved it. I just didn't get back into it. I was doing other things, so I definitely want to jump back into it. I have to start my save over again, obviously. But this is my favorite part of one of my favorite parts of the show. We get to talk about our gaming pickups. And I want to start off because I think it's apropos of talking about Hey Pikmin. I've been 4 for the Switch. It just came out. Just came out last week.
There you go.
So it is, I will say I'm early on in it. And I love the fact that when you played a demo that you could, once you play the demo, it saves your progress, and once you get the full game, you can go right in. So that's actually good. I think more demos should do that. Like more companies should do that with their demos. Just like Final Fantasy 16 did the same thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the ideal situation for the player. Sometimes it's a little bit tough because you don't always get the beginning slice, the opening intro slice of the game, and also depending on what kind of game it is, can make it a little bit difficult. If it's like a sports game or whatever else, like there's really not much that you can carry over because you probably get one or two teams, but when they can do it, I love it. Right? You just roll right into the game and you don't feel like you're wasting any time playing the demo, right? You're like, oh, I love this. Can't wait till it comes out. Want to just carry it over. It's good stuff.
Yeah. I did pick up. Now, I want to say this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the games I've picked up over the last, I want to say, 3 months, I've not had a chance to put in my collection yet. So they've just been sort of sitting in my box. I've added it to my collection, like in the app that I use to keep track of my collection, but I haven't actually added it to like their final home, their final destination on the shelf.
Right.
So some of these, yeah. So I have a lot of games. I don't know if I already talked about them on the show or not, right? Because sometimes I don't actually document it on the sheet, on the spreadsheet, on the show, the run of show before we go. Because sometimes it's just so much. So if I repeat something, I apologize, but it's still in the collection and still a pickup.
Right.
So,
right. Well, it's good you kind of clarified on that because, like, to say that you own it means that you have it isn't in your collection, but you're specifically referring to the fact that any new game that comes in, you want to catalog it first in your little digital app, right? And then eventually you'll work it in alphabetically to your collection, which may sound easy, but with the level of games that we have, it's difficult, especially making room and then like finding the right spot for it and moving everything over. At least one, depending on how many games you're putting in there. So it's a lot of work.
Well, it's easy or easier. I'm not saying anything's easy, but it's easier when you get a game and it starts with like O or P or later,
right?
Especially
you don't have to move that many over.
W.
Yeah.
It sucks when you get a game like this, AEW Fight Forever. It starts with A.
Yep.
And you got to move everything over. You got to shift everything over.
That's one of the reasons I don't own any ABBA CDs. Just can't do it. This is one of the reasons. I'm not going to get into all that, but.
So I did get speaking of that, I did pick up AEW Fight Forever. I got it on the Xbox Series X. Luckily enough, I just use that as an example. Lucky enough, right. I don't have that too big a Xbox Series X collection. I only got like 30, 35. Not even, no, I'm lying. It's like 50. So it was easy to put it in the front. I got Cyberbots for the Saturn, the Japanese version, because it didn't come out in America. Good, got that for a good price. Also picked up Sonic Origins for the Switch. I think I said that on the show before. If I didn't, just know I picked up Sonic Origins on the Switch.
Okay.
I don't like the fact, and I understand why they do it. I don't like the fact that for the Switch version, they have the cardboard, the cardboard cover, but then they have like a cardboard in it so it can fit the Switch, right? And different art books. Because I guess they don't want to make different size art books for like the PS4 version or the Xbox version. They want to make the same style, the same art book for every version.
The same format, yeah.
Yeah. Because you can easily just have a Switch game with the cardboard that fit the Switch box. And you can put the artwork inside the package.
Right.
But they don't do it that way. So, but this, it's just sort of keeping it preserved long term, sort of kind of difficult when you have something that has cardboard in it to keep it the same size, if you know what I'm saying. So that's a little bit annoying, but I still have the Switch version. I want to get the cartridge version. So
right.
I got Armored Core 5 for the Xbox 360, and I'm gonna fly through some of these too. Very nice. By the way, and we know we have new Armored Core game coming out next month, which probably would be in my next month pickups, the next episode. Street Fighter Alpha Warrior's Dreams. I got the long box for the PS1.
That was the subtitle for that game. A lot of people forget. It wasn't just Street Fighter Alpha. It was Street Fighter Alpha: Warrior's Dreams. Yeah.
Yeah. I have it for the Saturn as well, but the disc is kind of scratched up, and last time I tried to play it, it took a while to really wipe down. I need to resurface it. So I really wanted to get the PlayStation version. I got the long box. I picked up Teen Titans 2 for the GBA. I got Advance Wars 2 for the GBA. I got Home Alone for the SNES. That was like nothing. That was like a couple of bucks.
Oh wow!
Double Dragon.
That's crazy.
What?
I got a lot of history with that Home Alone game. I'll save
not
that
the greatest game
for another day. No, it's terrible. Game. It's terrible, but I played the crap out of it because I made that decision. That's the game I wanted.
Double Dragon Gaiden for the Switch.
Nice.
And one of the Holy Grail games for the PS2, I picked up Futurama.
Right. You wouldn't normally think about it, right? If you asked the average person to look through a stack of games and they came across Futurama, they would think, "Oh yeah, right. It's a licensed game tie-in on a TV show. How great could this be?" It's apparently an okay game, but didn't sell very well, and it's very coveted among gamers, right? You wouldn't know. If you know, you know.
I thought it was like from what I heard about it, I thought it was like a really good game. I mean, it's no, I'm not saying it's great. It's not Final Fantasy 16 level of great, but it ain't Fable level of trash, right? It's sort of somewhere in the middle.
You're agreeing those are the two
on the Dave scale. On the Dave scale.
Okay, all right.
On the Dave scale.
Right. All right. I don't know. I haven't actually played it because it's so hard to find. So who knows? But okay.
Yeah. Any good pickups this month?
Yes. I actually found just a couple of days ago, I was going to the Goodwill way up on the Upper East Side and took a nice bike trip. It was a whole big day. I was like, all right, I'm feeling it. I got energy. I'm going to ride all the way up. I rode through Central Park, which was awesome. The weather wasn't too bad. It was great. I got all the way up there, and they have 0 games. And I was like, come on, man. But as I parked the bike and then I started walking up, I saw somebody had a bunch of stuff out on the sidewalk, and I was looking around. Man had a GameCube carrying case, had all the wires for the GameCube, and I saw a couple of game cases. And I was like, all right, how much do you want for it? He's like, I don't know, $30. I said, all right, you're gonna be here a minute? He said, yeah. I says, okay. So I went up to the Goodwill. I didn't find anything. Got some money out of the bank. Came back. Got them down to $25. Took it home. So I am now the proud owner of a analog output only, right? Because remember, the OG ones had the digital output on there, so you could get a component video 480p if you had like a high def TV or ED TV, a progressive scan TV, I guess.
Yeah.
So I have that, which I think is a model that I don't have. I have the OG one, which is digital and AV. So I have a silver one that's just AV. But now I have a black one that's also just AV. So that's cool. And I got a couple of game cases. Not quite the games that were inside, but I got the case for Mario Party 7, which that alone is worth a good couple of bucks. I got the disc only of Super Mario Brothers Melee inside, which is definitely worth a couple of bucks, and a handful of other games. I got about 5 or 6 loose discs, 2 cases, and the GameCube. No controller, but I got all the wires and everything with it, so pretty happy about that.
Well, controller's not really hard to get nowadays.
No, and you can get third-party ones. I mean, I have a ton of them already, so it's not really that big of a deal, but yeah, true. Yeah, controllers are probably the easier part of that whole situation. So, yeah, man, happy to have it in the collection.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Dave. This episode is our top 3, and this month we're going to do our top 3 Marvel games of all time. So, when we actually decided this, I knew exactly which games I were going to pick. So, Dave, why don't you go first? Give me your top 3 Marvel games.
All right. Now let's kind of clarify a little bit. This is Marvel licensed property video games. In any sense of the word, if it's a Marvel character and they made a video game of it, it counts. And I love this question. We kind of talk behind the scenes. What are we going to do for this month? And this I think is a really good question, because we've had Marvel games all the way back to the Atari 2600, right?
Yeah, Spider-Man was on the Atari.
Yep.
It's actually not a bad game.
No. It's apparently really
for
good.
the time. I mean, for the time, probably not playable right now.
Right. So, and you got to kind of think of all the properties over the years. Some of them are tied to movies based on Marvel properties. Some of them are just tied to the particular characters. Some of them are tied to TV shows. So, the third game on my list, which is actually very interesting, because typically movie tie-in games don't do that well, because as we all know, a lot of the budget that goes into the studio acquiring the license, is that, right? Like if the company's got, we got a couple million to work on game X or whatever, right? Most of that budget's going towards acquiring the license, and then they have to build the game, and then they have to get the game out when the movie launches so that you get the synergy, right? For whatever reason. So they're up against a bunch of hurdles there. But I gotta say, the Spider-Man 2, based on the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man franchise, amazing. It was like GTA meets Spider-Man. It was an open-world Spider-Man game in New York City. They modeled a good, decent amount of New York City. You could free roam. You could, swing around. You do these little mini games in the air. You could get down to the ground and help save citizens who were in trouble. It was amazing. They had an upgrade system. You get all these different combos and moves and power-ups. Game was great. All right. It came out for PS2, Xbox. I think it also came out for GameCube too. Really cool. And one of the things that I thought was real notable about the game is that you could get all the way to the top of the Empire State Building, right? And you'd be like, yeah, of course, wouldn't you want that to be there? But when you get up there and you get to the top, and you can kind of like look around at the whole entire city, right? And it was like really cool because had that deep draw distance, right? You just kind of got a sense of like, wow, like you really feel like you're on top of the Empire State Building, right? Quality game. Loved it. Still holds up today, I think. Now, my number 2 game is when you're talking about Marvel, all right, you have to also talk about Capcom. All right, Marvel Capcom, storied history, amazing fighting games. I got to throw MVC1 up in the mix, all right? And I'm also going to throw up MVC2 as my number 1 pick. And I want to talk about both of those because I know I can hear Dan groaning in the background.
Clarify. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I mean, I know we didn't specifically state we shouldn't have more than one game in the series, but that's sort of like implied for variety reasons. By that same token, I could put, Marvel superheroes, X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel versus Street Fighter. There's so many in the damn series. X-Men Children of the Atom, they're all great, right? But Marvel versus Capcom is its own series. I mean, Marvel versus Capcom 1, 2,
I mean, it all led
3,
up to that. Yeah.
Instrument, which wasn't so great, but you could argue that those are different series.
I think
kind of named series, yeah.
I think MVC2 was the pinnacle. Although MVC3 was great, it moved to 3D, didn't use the 2D sprite-based stuff anymore. But I think MVC2 was the pinnacle, which is why it's top of the list. It's got 50 some odd characters. It's got some brand new creations in there. If Marvel and Capcom didn't have enough deep character lore to pull characters from, they're like, no, we got to put some more characters in there. And there's like at least 2 or 3 brand new characters, which is amazing. You can play as a giant cactus and Mingo in there, right? You can play as everybody. It's great. They got Iron Man, they got War Machine, they got I go on, right? So you've got the breadth and the depth of the character selection in MVC2, right? And you've got the 3v3 combo, which arguably I think is a little bit better. but and you've got a more mature combo system and fighting game system. They added some new mechanics in there, some new like mix-ups and juggles and whatever else, and like the kind of, starting a combo and then swapping another character out or using a character as an assist to get in there to continue the combo. Like, there's a lot more variety and all that stuff in there. But the one thing, well, two things that MVC1 has that MVC2 doesn't have, and I think MVC1 is better for it. One is the backgrounds. The backgrounds in MVC1 and all of the other Marvel and Capcom fighting games previously are 2D sprite-based. They're a little layered and parallaxed and whatnot, but you get these beautiful, beautiful backgrounds. You get, Dr. Wily's castle, and you get, the beautiful jungles, and you get the Russian nighttime cityscape, and they're beautiful. And you look at the ones in MVC2, and I appreciate what they were trying to do, but they kind of lack a little bit of personality, right? Because you can only have so many polygons on screen, and all the characters, upwards of 3 characters, all their sprite data. It's got to run at 60 frames a second, so you got to make sure everything's running through. The backgrounds are okay in 2. Backgrounds are much better in the first one, and in the first one, you had those extra assist characters because you only had 2 characters that you could fight with, and you had a third assist character. So you could have guys like Thor and like Arthur, and I think maybe like US Agent, and you could have all these other assist characters come in, and they would like come in and kind of like do their attack and help you with your combo and all that. So different, there's reasons to play MVC1 and there's reasons to play MVC2. Ultimately, MVC2 is a better game, but there's a reason to have both of them on the list, I think. So
I disagree.
Oh.
I know they're both great games in their own rights.
Mm-hmm.
I know if you only had to pick one, you would pick MVC2 because it is your number one.
Sure.
But I think really for variety's sake, going forward, like we should pick one in a series just to, spice it up, because technically you could have picked MVC 1, 2, and 3.
No, because there's not.
Well, you could have.
There's not a big difference between MVC 2 and 3, other than that the characters turned into 3D models at that point. All right, they went full on 3D, but more or less the mechanics are pretty similar. They obviously changed up a lot of the character roster and all that, but I just wanted to give shine to MVC1, where most people don't give it a lot of shine. They think, oh yeah, MVC2, the GOAT. And yes, it is, but MVC1 had a lot of good things going for it, so I'll just...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give my top 3.
Okay.
And don't worry, if anybody's listening, I didn't pick more than one game in a series, even though I could have easily done so as well. And especially
if
with
they're good games, for sure. Yeah.
Especially with my third pick, which is Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales for the PS4. And I could have easily said the original Marvel Spider-Man and Miles Morales, but I picked this one over that.
They're very similar, right?
They're very similar with the exception of, obviously, story elements are completely different because these are 2 different Spider-Mans, not Peter Parker. We talk about Miles Morales, and you have more of a, with Peter Parker, you have more of a focus on downtown, where Miles Morales, you have more of a focus on uptown, like in Harlem. Mm-hmm. So, that's majority of the story elements are going to be like Harlem based, where Peter Parker is downtown.
Right.
But the reason why I picked Miles Morales is the different seasons, right? They definitely had winter in that game, which I think is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And you have different powers, right? Because Miles Morales has like a shock power. So he can use electricity to his advantage on top of the Spider-Man or the regular Spider-Man powers. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons why I picked it. And if you have the PS5 version, you have slightly different, better graphics that you could use.
Sure.
So
yeah. There's the update for it. Yeah.
Until Spider-Man 2 comes out this year in October.
Yeah.
I think this is like the pinnacle of all Spider-Man games ever made.
Now,
and before that, I would have picked the original Marvel Spider-Man, and before that, I would have picked Spider-Man 2, because that was for a long time the best Spider-Man game of all time.
Do you think there was enough new in Miles Morales to put it in that? Because, I mean, to me, it seems like Spider-Man did all of that, more or less, with the exception of, like, the winter time. And Miles Morales has a different set of powers, but all of that kind of groundwork was laid by the original Spider-Man. The original PS4 Spider-Man, I should say.
The original PS4, yes, the groundwork definitely was made in both. And don't get me wrong, both story elements are compelling, awesome in their own right. You know, with surprises, right, and especially at the end of the original Marvel Spider-Man. I think the ending, just the final boss battle, was somewhat better than the one on Miles Morales. But I think if I have to pick one, I think I'm going to go with Miles Morales just because of the extra features that you have in it with the electricity, the extra powers you have in it with the electricity.
Okay.
I think that game is just slightly edged a little bit better. But I do anticipate Marvel Spider-Man 2 to be, like way better, way better than both these games.
Sure.
So I went with that as my third. I went with the Incredible Hulk. I'm talking about the original Incredible Hulk for the Sega Genesis and the SNES, but I'm going with the Genesis version because that's the one I played.
Okay.
And this was, I don't know if this was the first Hulk game, but this was like a Hulk game where it was definitely maybe the first good Hulk game. Because I remember there were other Hulk games that were terrible. I just don't know if this came out before those. But this, imagine you could play as Bruce Banner and then you get hit a couple of times and you turn into the Hulk. And imagine that on one of these 16-bit consoles, right? Like, that was awesome. And I remember going around, it starts out like you're in a construction site. It got progressively hard. Like, it was easy in the beginning and got progressively hard, but it's just that Hulk animation really did well. And they didn't make a good Hulk game until I want to say the Wii version of the Hulk, that generation of 360, Wii 360 and PS3 version.
There was
which
one
I
on
know
the PS2 and original Xbox that was great. That wasn't tied to any particular movie, and it was a little bit open worldy. You could pick up.
Oh, you know what? You're right, because they made two. They made two of them, and one of them sucked.
Yeah, well,
They
the
made two of them,
PS2
one of them
Xbox
sucked.
one is amazing. It's really good. Yeah.
Well, even so, that means after the Genesis and Super Nintendo game, they didn't make a good one until the PS2.
I think you're
So
right.
we skipped.
The one in the Saturn
skipped
was
the whole generation.
one in the Saturn wasn't too bad. It was like a beat 'em up.
I don't think I like that one. I have most of all the Hulk games, but I remember growing up. I played this game over and over again, and I loved the animation of turning into Hulk from Bruce Banner. So that was cool. And then the GOAT. I'm going to call this the GOAT because this is the best Wolverine game ever made too, but maybe the best Marvel game, and that is X-Men Origins Wolverine. And I'm going with the 360 one.
This is the one that you played for Saturday Morning Retro.
This is number
right?
one. Yeah.
Okay.
Did I do it for Saturday Morning Retro? Maybe.
Pretty sure you did.
Maybe.
I'm pretty sure you talked about it before. Yeah.
When everybody wants a Wolverine game, this is the game they go to. This is sort of like, you know what I would call this? This is like a Wolverine Uncharted game, because that's what it reminded me of somewhat. All right, like Uncharted 1 maybe. This is the Wolverine where you can actually use your Wolverine powers and destroy enemies, and you go into beast mode. And this game was awesome. The story, maybe not the best story.
Well, it was based off the movie, right? Which didn't have a great storyline, but
well, it was based in the movie, like in that time frame of the movie, but this wasn't a 1-to-1 movie tie-in.
Okay.
Like it was in that universe, so it was part of that universe, but this wasn't a 1-to-1 tie-in as far as everything that happened in the movie happened here. This was in the universe, so this is sort of like an extension of the movie, just like the Matrix was an extension of the actual movie. It wasn't, the one where Neo wasn't in it. Which Matrix games was? You remember that Matrix game where they only had Jada Pinkett, where she had to do that side mission in the Matrix 2, and she had to like destroy the grid, right?
Yep.
And they made a whole game based on that.
Yep.
Basically, that's what X-Men Origins Wolverine is.
Yep. Okay. I see. Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
So, love those. Love your top three, even though you did pick two in a series. But I would agree with you, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, the better game. And it is the pinnacle of like
Right? It's the
fighting,
GOAT.
especially fighting games.
It's
It
the
is the
GOAT.
go to fighting games. All right. So when we take a break, when we come back, we're going to dive deep into our backlog and talk about Fable and pro wrestling. And we're back. All right, Dave, let's dive deep into our backlog and talk about Fable and pro wrestling. And as always, I'm going to go first. I want to talk about pro wrestling. And you know, I'm a wrestling fan. I feel like that's the only time I get to talk about pro wrestling is if I play it for Saturday Morning Retro.
We talk about it a lot more than you think. There's at least one wrestling reference every episode, I think.
I think it's like every 5 episodes. Every 5 episodes. I don't think I talk about it as much as I would love to talk about it.
Listen. Well, all right.
So
let's get into it.
I want to talk. All right.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I loved this game, pro wrestling, back when I was a kid. So a couple of things. Not a lot about this game, so I'm picking from the internet. I'm picking from different sources and I'm not going to get into the semi-controversy of if, the creator of the game made it when he was at Nintendo or not at Nintendo, because none of that was verified, so I'm not going to touch on any of that stuff.
I didn't even know that was a thing. Interesting.
Yes. Masada Masuda. There was some controversy that Wikipedia has it as he was the sole programmer of this game. And if you don't know who Masada Masuda is, he created the Fire Pro Wrestling series that started in like 1989. He's famous for that. So there was a little controversy. Don't want to touch on it because I don't know what's true and what's not true. But I am going to put out there that there is a little bit of controversy if he was the sole programmer on this and when he actually created it. So I'm not going to get too much detail on that. But this game came out originally in Japan, October 13th, 1986, for the Family Computer Disk System. So, didn't realize. I thought I don't know why. I thought they all came out at the same time, but no. This came out for Family Computer Disk System in 1986, and in North America, it came out in March of 1987, and it was a black box game. If you know the early on NES games, this was one of. I think there were like 3 more black box games after this, 3 or 4. So this was sort of toward the tail end of the black box games.
Right. And these were like the first Nintendo games, all made by Nintendo internally, more or less, right? Or at least published by Nintendo. And Super Mario Brothers and tennis and baseball and all of the early games were black box. And I guess I didn't realize this was so late in the life cycle of them, but yeah.
Yeah, this developed by Nintendo R&D 3. I already talked about Masuda, published by Nintendo. This is a wrestling/fighting game. And it came out on the Famicom, the NES, and Nintendo Switch Online, which is actually where I play. I played a lot of it as a kid, so I did play the NES version. But for Saturday Morning Retro, I just relied on Nintendo Switch Online service to play this on. This little background, this was actually the 3rd wrestling game to be released on the NES after Tag Team Match Muscle and Tag Team Wrestling. So I actually thought this was the first wrestling game, but I was wrong. It was the 3rd wrestling game to be released on this, on the NES. And if you ask me, the best. It's even better than the WWF games that came after it. Funny enough,
right?
They just couldn't deal with this.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why this game really excited me as a kid, because I wanted to play this with my cousins and my friends, because I love pro wrestling. And I didn't get this when this first came out. I got this a little bit later. But the wrestling games for the WWF, I didn't know anything about WCW, so I'm not going to talk. I didn't know about that as a kid, but the WWF games sucked. growing up, and I wanted a really good wrestling game. So when I got this was a wrestling game that me and my cousins and my friends can play, and we would just pretend that the characters were the WWF characters. We would just pretend that they were WWF characters, because when you're a kid, you use your imagination a lot.
Right.
So, little on a story. This was actually a made-up federation, the Video Wrestling Association, the VWA.
Sounds like a real wrestling federation. Yeah.
It does. Choose between, well, listen, you always got to have wrestling in the name. That's how that works. World Wrestling Federation, World Wrestling Entertainment, All Elite Wrestling, and, World Championship Wrestling.
Right.
Yeah. TNA was the only one that didn't have it. Have wrestling in the name, Total Nonstop Action, but they rebranded as Impact Wrestling now.
Sure. Well,
Today.
there you go. Yeah,
they put
ended up getting wrestling in there. There you
go. You get to choose between 6 wrestlers. You can play this one player or with like I said, a family member or friend, and 2 players. You had Fighter Hayabusa, which was a Japanese fighter. Giant Panther, which is from the USA. Stereotypical King Korn Karn from Korea. The character doesn't age so well. King Slender. King Slender from the USA. Starman, which was a Mexican wrestler, pink, and he looks like Power Ranger 5 Zeo with the star on his face.
Okay.
It looks exactly like it.
Okay.
And this part I didn't know. The Amazon, which is the wrestler, the Amazon, from Parts Unknown, served as the inspiration for Blanca in Street Fighter 2. So
interesting. Wow. Yeah, that kind of makes sense now when you think about it. But wow, I didn't realize that was that was kind of the impetus for Blanca.
Yeah, you have to beat all the wrestlers to win the title, the VWA title. And you must defend the title 10 times successfully. And then you get to face the final boss, which is actually the real champion, which is a mystery character named the Great Puma.
Right.
Which you never get to play as, by the way. You never get to play as him.
Right.
I don't know if there's any codes. I tried to look it up. I didn't see any codes to play as him. So it is completely a hidden character that you have to, final boss, you have to go, you have to successfully defend your title after you actually win it.
Okay.
By the way, after you have to defend it 10 times, and after like maybe the 4th or 5th time, it gets progressively harder. So, I can tell you this, I never achieved this as a kid. I did see my cousin do it, my older cousin, who was much older than me. He did it, but I never did it as a kid because it got really hard. I won the belt, which was like a monumental feat in itself, because this game is not easy. It is hard. It is hard. It is. Yeah. It is, and it is hard. It's not Dark Souls hard, or I'm gonna say NES hard, but it's definitely up there in difficulty.
Okay.
It's one of the parts I hated about this game growing up, that it's hard, and you have no health meter at all. You don't see a health meter, so you have no.
Oh. That's like more of a modern video game trope, right? Where you see the effects of your character on you can tell whether he's like, down on energy. He'll start like huffing and puffing, and he'll start moving a lot slower. Wow. Okay.
Well, the only way to determine if the health is low is by the music. So the music slightly changes, up tempo beat, like a final boss battle, like up tempo beat, when your health starts to run low. So there are music cues in the game to show you when the health is low. So it's which is kind of annoying, because if this is something where you just want to play and listen to a podcast, you can't really do it unless you really want to play it on super hard mode, and you won't.
You need the audio to tell you where you're at. Yeah. Huh.
You need the audio to tell you where you're at.
Okay.
Gameplay wise, all the rest is share punching, kicking, running attacks. I mean, there are only 2 buttons. Right. So all the combinations, if you really want to master the game, you should buy the manual, because they do in the manual show you all the different move sets, because it's always about a button combination with the D-pad to show you how to whip into the ropes and do a strong attack and a weak attack, right? You do lockups, and each wrestler can execute a body slam, back suplex, front suplex, and pile drivers. It is mentioned actually in the manual that you shouldn't try any of these sort of super moves in the beginning of the match because you haven't worn down your opponent and he will just counter it. So don't try for those moves too early on. Try to wear them down with punches and in kicks. You can whip your opponent into the ropes and clothesline them, or even jump over the ropes to splash them on the outside. The good thing is you can jump on a turnbuckle and splash on your opponent. However, if you stay up on a turnbuckle too long, you lose the match, which is not actually it's not actually.
Oh yeah,
they don't have those rules in wrestling. That's actually a wrestling move.
It's only like ring out, if you're outside the ring for too long. Huh.
Well, all matches are 5 minutes, and you can win by pinfall or a 20-second count out on the outside. Right? So there are no submissions in this match.
No
that's
submissions,
good to know.
No knockouts. Okay.
Yeah. So graphically, this was a colorful game, beautiful game, colorful crowd. The attention to detail is amazing for the time, especially if this was done by one programmer. It's that much more impressive. Bright, colorful ring, red, white, and blue. The cameraman outside the ring moves left from right, so he has the camera and he's moving around, which is actually, you don't really see that in pro wrestling, but I know they did that for visual cues. That's just cool to see that the cameraman is moving around. The ref moves in the ring, right? Because a lot of those games, especially the early WWF games, didn't even have a referee. It just counted 1, 2, 3. The thing to note about that, though, is the ref is trying to stay out of your way and let you guys wrestle. So if you're too far away when you go for the pin, you have to wait for him to come over before he does the count. He has to come over to your shoulders before he does the count. So you may waste a second or two if you wait to pin him when you pin your opponent when the referee's too far away.
Right.
And then they have 2 announcers. And actually, it's funny, one of the announcers has like an evil look on him, so he's sort of, because announcers usually is a good guy and a bad guy, a heel and a baby face, as they say in wrestling. So you can always tell, this guy must be a heel because there's like an evil look on him, an evil look. But they actually don't say any words. So there are no words or voice acting in this game at all. Fun fact, didn't know this. Pro wrestling, volleyball, tennis, and baseball, all black box games, all have the same intro music when you start the game.
Yeah, I mean they are all kind of like sports titles, right? Action sports stuff. So interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and then the referee, he doesn't say, and I thought this was a unique part, and I forgot about this. He doesn't actually say the words 1, 2, 3. But the sound that they make, 1, 2, 3, it's you can hear 1, 2, 3, but it doesn't actually say 1, 2, 3.
I see. So,
but it's like he's sounding out 1, 2, 3, but he's not saying the word 1, 2, 3.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
Then you got, when you actually win, well, whoever wins, the crowd cheers and it starts, flashing. Everything starts flashing. Here's another fun fact. That crowd cheering, similar, if not the same, to Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
I was just going to ask. Yeah. They use that for a number of games. They may have even used that in ice hockey too, right? You get that kind of digitized roar. I'm not 100% sure, but I know they had, or actually I'm pretty sure that they had like a crowd roar in that game too, when you scored a goal or whatever else.
Okay.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to check out. I'll take a look after this.
Does this game hold up today?
Oh,
I want to say
that's the question.
I would say that depends. If you're an old school gamer and you like any NES style games, then yes, this is a game for you. But if you're one of those, you can't really get into older games. It's like, I can't really get into Atari games, right? I didn't grow up with it. I didn't have nostalgia for it. And Atari style games just are so simplistic in nature.
they're really one note. That's just
Yeah.
kind of.
Those aren't, games for me. And I understand, the generation above us, the, older generation, they may love those style games, those simplistic style games.
Hmm.
So I would say they would be the same for this. If you are an NES style, 8-bit style lover of games, this would, especially if you like hard games, this would be the game for you. I would actually love to see this in a triple R segment to where they sort of remade it somewhat. I'm not saying make it a modern game as far as like visuals, but maybe put some modern features in it, like a health bar. So
Sure. Maybe a couple extra wrestlers, right? Because there's only 6.
there's only 6, and
You know.
you gotta beat them a million times before
Right.
you elevate to get the final boss. I do
Yeah.
like the fact that each wrestler, like I said, I did say earlier that they all have the standard kick punch, and you need the button combinations. They all have a signature move. They do all have signature moves, and I love the fact that the Blanca, the Amazon, he does an illegal bite to your head.
Mhm.
Or you use Starman. I think Starman does like the big chop, which is even hard to execute.
Okay.
But their signature moves aren't, other than the Amazon biting your head, which I thought was cool as a kid. The signature moves mean nothing. So maybe modernize that, whether you give them better signature moves, that would be awesome too. If this was like a remake type of ordeal.
Right.
Now, this game was obviously, this predates Metacritic, way predates Metacritic. So there are no Metacritic scores, but this game was celebrated. People really liked this game. It scored a total of 30 out of 40 by the staff of Famicom.
Uh-huh.
Computer Game World named it the best sports game of 1988 for Nintendo, stating it offered realistic graphics, nonstop action, and realistic wrestling moves of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Game Informer named it the 79th best game ever made in 2001.
Wow, there
So,
you go.
this
Up
game-
until that point, 79th best game ever. Wow, that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild, because at that point, we've had Half-Life, GoldenEye, Mario 64, Super Mario Bros. 3. I mean, come on now. There's a ton of great games that have come out. StarCraft.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. So let me ask you this. Like, there's a party situation going on and whatnot, and, you had, obviously, like, say the system's hooked up and, whatever else. Would you, like, bust out the 2 controllers and, like, have a couple rounds of pro wrestling, or is it not that kind of scene?
I would say it, again, it all depends. Well, it all depends on who's the crowd, right?
Okay.
If it's a crowd of people of our, age range, right? I definitely would bust this out. But if it's like I'm busting out for like my younger family members, I wouldn't do that. Like this wouldn't be a game that they would be interested in. We would just stick to the 2K games, or even the SmackDown games or the N64 games. This wouldn't be pleasing to a younger crowd unless they're specifically into difficult 8-bit games.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But if it was us, oh, hell yeah. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what would I score this game?
Wow.
And I know I'm looking at it.
Question, Dan.
I'm looking at it somewhat with nostalgic glasses. I do know that. I would give this game a solid 7.
Okay.
And if you're looking to buy this game, then most NES games are brought loose cartridge only. You can get this on Lukey for $11.47, so it's affordable.
Hey, there you go.
So Dave, I've been waiting all month. I'm not gonna lie, because you said you were gonna do this last month, so you.
That's right.
I've been waiting all month.
I'm doing it, Dan. It's happening. I'm going for the go. I'm going for the game. I'm going for it. Fable.
I want to hear all about the original Fable.
Oh, and right. It's good that you said the original Fable, because they've already done a remaster/remake of this game for the 360. That was Fable. I forget what they subtitled it, but They made a brand new version of it on the Unreal 3 engine. But no, talking about the original Fable from 2004, right? Came out September 14th, 2004 for Xbox. It eventually came out for Windows. I don't think the Windows version came out day and date as the Xbox version, but it did come out. And they did also make a Macintosh version, which I know Dan loves his Mac products. That was March 31st of 2008. They made a Mac port of the game. This game is developed by Big Blue Box Studios, which is a subsidiary or a satellite studio of Lionhead Studios, which was founded by Peter Molyneux. All right. Published by Microsoft Game Studios. The Macintosh version published by Feral Interactive. And like I said, it was released on Xbox, Windows, Mac, and then eventually Xbox 360 for the remaster remake. It's an action RPG, open world action RPG. I put open world in quotes. It's a very loose term, but it's technically considered open world. And I played it on the original Xbox. I tried, actually, fun fact, I tried playing it on the 360, and I tried playing it on the Xbox One, or the Xbox Series X, but they don't have any compatibility for it, because they made the Xbox 360 version, right? So that's the version I could have played on those systems, but I wanted to play the OG one, so I busted out the OG Xbox with the Xbox Series, with the Xbox S controller. And, that's how I ended up playing it. So I played it on an old school CRT. I played it more or less how I played it back in the day, right? Because I remember vividly playing this game back in the day and beating it in a weekend, more or less, and then getting very upset that I just spent $50 on this game and it was already over. But we'll get into that. We'll get into my new impressions of the game.
Maybe you're just that good at games, Dave. You ever thought about that?
Well,
maybe you're just that good.
Well, I'll get into all of that in the gameplay section and all that. But just a bit of background on this game, because I did a bunch of research for this and found out some interesting stuff. But so Big Blue Box is a studio that was spun off of Bullfrog Studios, which was Peter Molyneux's original studio. So a lot of studios that are still going on today came from Bullfrog after Bullfrog eventually dissolved. They all kind of went off and did their thing. Big Blue Box, I guess they were still pretty friendly with Peter Molyneux, so they kind of teamed up again. Big Blue Box was their own studio, but they were like a subsidiary of Lionhead, which was kind of interesting. And Big Blue Box was the one that wanted to create an RPG like no other, an ambitious RPG like no other. So much so that this idea has been kicking around since the mid-'80s. And it was originally called Thingy. That was the original title and conception of this game. Then it was called Wish World, and then Project Ego, which is the one that pretty much everybody knows, because Project Ego was the final name before it turned into Fable, right? And that game and iteration had a 4-year development cycle. More than 70 people developed this game. So at the time, that was pretty substantial. Now, I mean, you look at a Red Dead or a GTA or a Spider-Man or whatever, hundreds of people are going to be, you're going to have a credit roll that lasts a week, So it's not 70 people nowadays is not a lot. Back then was a lot, especially in 2000 when they first started working on it.
Or you could be like Masuda and be the sole programmer.
Yeah, you could be. Well, here's some interesting things. So the original idea for Fable was it was more of a god sim, which kind of makes sense knowing the studio that it came from, knowing Peter Molyneux's involvement. He was the creator of Populous, the Populous series. He was the creator of Black and White, which are I think Populous possibly may have been the first God Sim game where you kind of control the world right? And you kind of affect everything that's going on. But they wanted like a God Sim mixed with an RPG, so you could affect the world and the game around you, which was kind of interesting. Also, it started off development on the Dreamcast, of all things.
What? No, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
and obviously they.
So you know what that means? You know what?
Yeah.
That means the original Xbox is officially the Dreamcast too. You got what you wanted, Dave.
Hey,
The Dreamcast.
so there you go. There you go. It makes sense why it shifted over. They obviously read the tea leaves, and they saw that, well, hey, the Dreamcast is not doing well because the game came out in 2004. If they started development in 2000, Dreamcast wasn't around actively very long. It was big in Japan. Well, actually, no, it wasn't big in Japan. It was big everywhere else. It wasn't big in Japan. Couldn't really sustain it, so they ended up closing doors really quickly. But I don't think it lasted that long in the Dreamcast. I think once they found out that the Xbox was going to be a thing, it's kind of a, I wouldn't say a natural shift, but it makes sense why they would kind of like move towards that. And I'm going to quote from Dean Carter, who was one of the heads of Big Blue Box. And this is from the Wish World design documents. This is the original kind of conceit and creation of the game. And he says, imagine playing a 3D Zelda where the world is constantly changing for you and where your actions alter the world for other players at the same time. So that's kind of interesting to see where the roots of this came from and then where the game ends up. And, I'll get into the kind of all the nitty gritty stuff, the Project Ego stuff, the all of the kind of claims and all of the, promises that were mostly unkept when we get into kind of the gameplay stuff and whatnot. But it's interesting to see like the game that they originally wanted to create and then what it ended up becoming. Now, as far as the success goes of this game, or unsuccess of this game, it did phenomenally well. It did quite well. It was a commercial success, selling 375,000 copies during the first week, 600,000 during the first month, 1.4 million by March of 2005, and by July 2006, the Xbox version had 1.5 million units sold. And 58 million in the U.S. alone. And Next Gen Magazine, RIP Next Gen, ranked it as the 29th highest selling game, launched for the PS2, Xbox, or GameCube between 2000 January and July 2006 in that country, which would be the U.S. And overall, it sold about 3 million copies of the original version. That's not bad. That's pretty good, considering like the time that it came out in and whatnot. 3 million nowadays is not necessarily the biggest thing to sneeze at, but back then it was really good. And the review scores and the general fan sentiment was pretty positive on the game. But we'll get into that too. So that's just kind of a little bit of the background. I think it's very interesting and important to kind of go through to see where the game came from and what it ended up ultimately being. As we know, it's an action RPG, so every action RPG has a story that is crucial to the game, right? That is one of the main reasons why people play RPGs or action RPGs is for the story. And this game doesn't disappoint. It has a story. It's not a very good one, but in a general sense, what happens is you start off as a kid in the town of Oakvale, I believe, and you do some tutorial stuff, right? You talk to your dad, and he says, hey, you have to get a gift for your sister's birthday. Her birthday's coming up, and you can run around the town, and you can start doing some little activities to get you acclimated to the game, really, and to get some money to buy a gift for your sister. But, it's really a tutorial, so you get a couple of chances to engage in the morality system to do a good thing or a bad thing. You can You can choose to help out certain people or not help out certain people if you want. And then once you get enough money, you buy the gift for your sister. And then it all spirals out of control as the town goes on fire. You lose your parents, this and that. And this dude named Maze warps into town and says, hey, if you want to live, come with me. He takes you to the Hero Academy, right? He warps you away from town and he gives you a spiel about how, you're the hero of destiny and you need to train and whatever else. You go through this Hero Academy, yada, yada, yada. And when you get old enough, I guess in your teens or whatever, it doesn't explicitly say how old you are, but I'm assuming by the time you're like 18 or whatever, then the game actually begins and you can go out into the game world and you can basically explore and kind of do what you want. And that's really where the game kicks off. That's essentially the story. Like, the idea is you have to go out and find your sister, figure out where she's at. Like, you find out that she's like still alive. You have to figure that out, and then you kind of come across like the game's ultimate villain and a couple of weird twists that happen during the game that aren't really. They kind of come out of left field. They don't really pay off. I don't want to necessarily spoil anything, but it's not really the best story writing. So it's kind of whatever. And I think a lot of that kind of takes a back seat, especially in the early part of the game. You're kind of just going through and just doing missions, and that's just kind of like moving the quote-unquote story along until like the big plot points come up in the latter half of the game. So say what you want about the story. It is what it is. There are other elements to the game which are supposedly the bits that are lauded that I kind of want to get into. And the big thing about this game, and the thing that people tend to praise, is the overall gameplay and the amount of choice and kind of the morality system and the open worldness of it. That these are the things that people are like, oh yeah, Fable's great because you can do all this like cool stuff in the game. I didn't think that back in the day, and spoilers, I don't think that now. And I do want to be fair when talking about the gameplay, because it's not terrible. It's not terrible.
Wait, you've been telling me it's terrible for like ever since we've been doing this show. You've been telling me it's been terrible gameplay. And that's the main reason why you hate the game.
Well, let me go ahead and say this, right? If you take out all of the stuff, okay. Let me talk a little bit about Promises Unkept. All right, I think that's the big elephant in the room, right? When Project Ego was a thing, and Peter Molyneux was going around and being the mouthpiece for this game, and he was saying a lot of stuff about what this game is going to allow you to do, and how there's going to be like this big revenge aspect. So like when like things go wrong or you get wronged, you can like seek revenge on somebody, or how like you could plant an acorn and that would turn into a tree later on in life, and then you could chop down that tree, and like how like the morality system is so big and wide, and like it'll affect and change the game world around you, and you have all these choices and whatever else. None of that stuff came to fruition. And all the stuff that they do have in the game is very shallow. It's very surface level. Like, you can get a haircut. You can buy different colored outfits. You can buy like a light outfit and a dark outfit to like go along with your personality. You can do like maybe close to like 100 different emotes in the game to like express your feelings towards NPCs and whatever else. You can go fishing. You can buy a house. You can romance a woman and eventually get married, and you can cheat on that person, and you can buy a shop to earn extra income and whatever else. You can do all those things.
This sounds like Cyberpunk.
No.
It sounds like GTA. That sounds like a GTA, or early GTA game.
It sounds like that on its surface, but everything is so basic and so rudimentary that, like, there's just not a lot to it. Like I came across a house I could buy, and I already had enough money from grinding at the little memory match card game that I just bought a house, and it was like, oh, well, okay. There wasn't a lot of fanfare around it. And now I have a house. What do I do with it? I could rent it out for extra income. I was like, okay, so I did that. Now I'm making passive income. That's it. There's not a lot to these systems, right? They're not very engaging. So maybe, somebody else would kind of find some enjoyment in the fact that you can do all these things, but like I want to interact with them in a way that's like deep and meaningful, at least a little bit, but they're not. And like that even comes down to the combat and all that, right? So there's a lot of things they promised that weren't in the game. There's a lot of things that they kind of like, well, hey, this game's going to be great. You can do all these cool things that are in the game that aren't very deep. And when I went to look at the reviews for all of these, I looked at the completionist, I looked at a bunch of YouTube reviews, I looked at the print reviews for the game at the time, and everybody came up with the same thing. They're all like, this game is great, but the combat's very basic. It's very simple. The systems aren't like great to engage with, right? And I'm like, these are all the things that I'm saying. Like, what is so good about this game? Like, it's almost like baby's first RPG, So it's like, yeah, I guess it's like, and I remember when I originally played it, I was like kind of excited and kind of into it a little bit. I mean, I beat the game. There was enough there for me to get to the end of the game, but it was literally over in a weekend. I beat it. I bought it from the music CD shop that I worked at the time. I bought it that Friday, and I believe I beat it by like that Sunday, or maybe even Monday. And it was like, and it was the same thing that happened now. The game kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me to do these new missions and quests and all that. And part of that, well, I'll get into like why that is too, but like
sounds like what I do with Call of Duty. I beat it in the weekend, same thing.
Right, but Call of Duty is not claiming to be a open world RPG with like all these cool things. Like, it's literally a linear shooter. You go from point A to point B, you do this thing, you do that thing. It's a concise, small, maybe 8-hour experience, right? Maybe 10 to 12 if it's a little bit longer, or you put it on a harder difficulty. And that's cool for what that is, and I would be like perfectly fine with that. Like, maybe I would even want a little bit more or whatever, but when you're dealing with this big open world RPG, like, you expect there to be a lot there, and then before you know it, the game's over, and you're like, wait a minute, you didn't get to interact with any of the stuff and the whatever else. I mean, it's calling itself one thing, and it's actually something else. And I think a lot of that comes down to the root fundamentals of the game, right? Like for one thing, you're being pushed through the game pretty quickly, and that's part of the fundamental problem with the game, is that the narrator, who is there all the time, is telling you, hey, you have more quests, come back and do more quests. There's no way to shut them off. Even like when you're in combat, he'll incessantly tell you you're low on health, you're low on mana. You as the player, any normal player, is aware that your health is low. There are visual indicators. There is a health meter, unlike pro wrestling. There is a health meter, right? You know your health is low. And even if whether you have health potions or not, the narrator is still telling you, and the narrator is the head of the Heroes Guild. He keeps telling you, hey, your health is low, It's like, I get it. No way to turn him off, which is super annoying, right? So that's kind of part of the problem. Even if you wanted to engage with a lot of these other systems, like the fishing and the whatever else, the game is kind of pushing you to continue the story, move it along to the next set piece. So I kind of found that a bit of a problem. It wasn't necessarily great. So yeah. And like, as far as the combat goes, you can do melee, you can do ranged, and you can do magic. So melee is controlled. You hit the black button, you take your sword out. You hit the white button, you take out your bow. And if you want to do magic is hold down the right trigger, and then you do one of the face buttons to do a magical spell. There are like a good 18 spells in the game, so you do get a decent amount of stuff that you can choose to spec into if you want or not. I tried really hard to be a ranged fighter, because I remember in the first game I did melee with a little bit of magic, and I blasted through the entire game. I said, let me try it a little bit different. And I hated doing the ranged. The range combat wasn't great. Didn't really like it that much. And I fell back to doing melee with some magic on the side again. So I don't think I did a great job of making all of the different types of character builds enticing or different enough or varied or even enough. I don't know what the word is, but and they even kind of said, like, from the early get-go, is that you can make your own character, you can play how you want to play, and you can kind of mold the game style and the game world, based around your character. And like I fell into my old character archetype. I was basically a spell sword again. So I was like, okay. And then combat was also super easy because you hold down the L button to trigger to lock onto somebody, just like in Zelda, Link Ocarina of Time, and you can circle strafe around them. You do have a roll mechanic; you can roll out of the way, which is fine. And there's a combo meter, which the narrator always tells you about. Build up your combo meter. Build up your combo meter. So that's super annoying, but you can build up your combo meter, and then you get a super attack when your weapon glows orange. And then you can hit the B button. It'll do like a big overhead smash or whatever. But it's so basic and boring. When you're down on health, you use a potion. It's fine. Then you get back into the action again. And it's the same thing for the bosses, right? The bosses don't really have any unique attack patterns. They don't really do anything special. Even all the way down to the final boss, like the Jack of Blades, right? It's pretty simple. He's got a pretty simple pattern. You move out of the way and you hit him. You rinse and repeat. And that's like essentially the entire game. And I tried to play this a little bit differently. I tried to engage with the systems a little more, but it just kind of falls flat. Not to mention, it is an RPG, but it's all of the areas and even the towns. Towns are very tiny. They're very small, which could be a good thing. It can be nice and intimate, but there's not really a lot to do. There's a lot of rando NPCs walking around. They don't really do much other than either clap for you or say ooh, he looks scary. That's about their interaction of it. And that's based on your morale. If you're a good guy, they'll clap for you. If you're a bad guy, they'll kind of cower in fear, but they don't really do that much. So, you can go in, you can maybe find a quest or two, but you go to the shop and you buy stuff. You go to the bar and you play the mini game to rake in some money. That's about it. But they're all very tiny, and they all look about the same. Every town is exactly the same. They have the same kind of style to them. So it's a little upsetting. You can't really tell, Bowerville from Oakvale or whatever. They all kind of look the same. Not to mention, the all the other areas that you go to where there's combat and you do all the quests and whatnot, they're all very tight. They're all very linear. They're straight paths with maybe some little branching points, which go to another linear area, which is kind of a straight path with some branching points on it. So, it's not really a lot of big open wide sets. There's not really a lot of things that you're like, oh wow, this looks great. It all looks nice enough. It does have that Xbox kind of polish and feel. It does have some bloom lighting in there. It does have a certain art aesthetic to it. So there is some charm to it. All the characters speak with an English accent. So there is some stuff to kind of, there is some endearing stuff to it, but it's just all not that great. Even the environments, there's only 3 different environments. There's the forest, there's the spooky more dark forest, and there's the winter area. That's about it. There's not really any desert stuff. There's not really any there is some coastal stuff, but it's really just well, here's where the grass ends and there's a little bit of sand and then here's the water. It's not really that crazy. So it's not really a big mix of different areas. So everything starts to seem very similar. I'll say the map and navigation system, not great. And I know this was one of the first attempts at kind of console open worlds RPG, action RPG stuff, right? This is before Mass Effect, This is before any of the big Grand Theft Autos like, GTA 4 and whatever else. This is before The Witcher, and they were trying some new stuff, but they needed more time in the oven. Wasn't that great? Not to mention, there is a lot of loading time. Every time you go from screen to screen, there's a load screen, and since the areas are very small, there's going to be a lot of loading. That's not great. And then I guess like the other big thing is the morality system, right? The morality system is you do a good thing, you get good karma. You do a bad thing, you get bad karma, right? And it does affect your character. So the more good things you do, you'll start like growing like a glow and you'll get a halo around you. The more bad things you do, you'll literally grow horns on your character and maybe like a dark cloud or flies will come up above you. But it doesn't really do anything other than certain townfolk will clap and certain townfolk will cower in fear. Like, you affect you, but you don't affect the world around you. If that like makes any sense. So,
but I'm saying this is an early 2000s game. The cowering fear around you, that affects the game. I mean, it may not affect the story, overall arching story, but that sounds like a good first attempt to it. Well, especially for the time that it came out. I
can kind of mention it now, but there are games that came out and have been out for a little bit that did it a lot better. Games like Knights of the Old Republic or Fallout 1 and 2. There's other action RPGs like Kingdom Hearts, which have more engaging systems. Better RPGs with big expansive stories like Final Fantasy and Xenosaga and Suikoden. The thing of it is, like, if you're gonna say that it has all this stuff in there, that's cool and all, and it's cool that it is in the game, and I get what you're saying, but you want it to be somewhat meaningful, right? Like it doesn't, like, I expected it back then. I expected it now, that it would be more to it. And it's just like, why even bother having it in the game if it's just going to be like a cosmetic thing to the game? And it literally is. It's a cosmetic thing. The NPCs say a different line and you look a little bit different. But that's it. And the other thing that kind of undermines all of it is that later in the game, there's these temples. The Temple of Avo, I think, is on the good side, and there's a dark temple too that you can offer gifts to and pray to, and you can basically just turn your character good or bad. That's it, right? You can basically wipe out all of the stuff you did the whole entire game. So it's like you didn't really build up to anything, right? Which is like kind of annoying, and like, I think the reason they did that, so there is a mechanic to the morality system, and that's the ending. Depending on if you're mostly good or mostly bad, determines one of the 4 endings that you'll get. I think there's 2 good and 2 bad endings, but the whole thing is undermined because towards the end of the game, you can just pray to the other temple and become bad, and then you can get the bad ending if you want. So it's just, I don't know. I think it's like a half-baked system. You know what I'm saying? Like, not to mention, there's tons of games that have done it much better. So it's definitely not something I'm going to jump back into just because they were like, one of the first games to kind of try something different. It doesn't mean that it's good. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just, yeah.
Is it more so of the promises made and they didn't live up to the promise, didn't live up to the hype? Would this game, at least maybe for you, would you see it in a different light? You know what I mean? Like, what if he didn't say any of that stuff? What if Peter Peter didn't say any of this stuff?
Right.
And the game, hey, we have a new game, they showed you gameplay and said, hey, it's a new, exclusive game for the Xbox, try it out. Would you think somewhat differently of this game?
Well, that's a good question, and I kind of stated in all the Project Ego stuff out of it, right? I don't care that I can't grow an acorn and then eventually chop it down later in life. I don't care that there's not a revenge system in there. What I care about is what's in the game, and are those things in the game fun to interact with? And on a surface level, maybe, but once you start interacting with it, you're like, there's really nothing here. And to me, that's the problem, right? It's the systems are all half-baked. Honestly, if they had less, if they maybe took out the morality system, but they had a thing where you could, they had a better fishing mini game, or the like the house buying mechanic or the marriage mechanic was more fleshed out, I would be happier, right? If they just had more thought out systems, I'd be happier. If the combat wasn't so basic and straightforward, I would be, because there'd be something to like really engage with, right? You kind of just turn your head off and you just go right into it. Like it's not hard to, it's not hard to get through any particular scenario, which is that's the stuff that really annoys me. Not to mention the inherent problems with the game, where and I kind of mentioned this a little bit, but the Heroes Guild is your hub. So if you want to level up, you got to go back to the hub, right? If you want to get a new quest, more or less you have to go back to the hub, right? And there is a quick warp. You can quick warp there, and you can quick warp back to the last place you were just at, which is nice. But they always force you back to the hub, so much so that the narrator keeps telling you you have new quest cards when you're trying to do maybe side missions or whatever else. He will not stop telling you, hey, you have a new quest card. Like, I get it, but it's like you can, on the one hand, try and say that's a big open world expansive game with all this cool stuff to do, but you're pushing me towards completing the story very quickly. Like, okay, you can say that like one time and then that's good. Tell me my health is low one time and I go, okay, like, all right, I get it. That's the system. I should be looking out for my health, or at least be able to turn off the narrator, because he's incredibly annoying. And I think that's a problem with the game. Like, I don't understand why I have to level up at the guild. Like, thematically, that kind of makes sense, right? Like, the guild is like where you're like do your training and the whatever else, and there's obviously like, masters of their craft, the masters of magic, and the masters of melee combat. Maybe you learn from them, but they're not there. It's just a glowing circle you go into, right? Mechanically, you should be able to go into the menu and access your character sheet and then be able to, level up your stuff that way. So you don't have to be taken out of the world and where you're at. It's just super annoying to have to do that. And like, no game has really done that since, they don't make a good, compelling reason for you to go back home to the main guild, So, I'll say that. And I could keep going on about the gameplay, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, but it's all very surface level. And once you start scratching the surface, I mean, that's it. There's a fine layer of sand, and then you hit rock. So, I don't want to like beat a dead horse there, but the feelings that I had back then are more or less the feelings that I had now. I can give some points to the art direction. I can give some points to the overall graphics. They did look pretty good. There was, like I said, there was some bloom lighting, which was kind of nice. There were reflections, although they were faked, they still had like reflections on the weapons when you turn the weapons and all that. There were some little flourishes. I mean, the character voices, it was nice that they had the English accents. I thought that was kind of cool. I did find out that the main theme song was done by none other than Danny Elfman. That I didn't realize. That's why that's so good. And if the name Danny Elfman rings any bells, he was the lead singer of Oingo Boingo. He famously did the music for like Beetlejuice and Batman and The Simpsons, and he's the movie soundtrack guy now. So that was like super cool that they got him. There was somebody else who did the other music, which was also a highlight of the game. I thought the other music was pretty good for what it was. But yeah, I mean, like, otherwise, I think the core of the gameplay just kind of fails. Outside of all of the Project Ego stuff, right? The Project Ego stuff aside, you judge the game by what it is, by what's in the by what's inside. It's not so great. Not so great. So, as far as the Well, I mean, as far as it holding up today, the 100% doesn't hold up. Even at the time, I didn't think it really held up that way. It held up better back in the day because there wasn't really a lot, especially on the console, kind of expansive open world RPGs or RPGs with a, big morality system and a lot of different things to do. We didn't have a lot of those games necessarily, but especially now, there's far better games to play in the high fantasy setting specifically. There's better games in the Fable franchise that you can play. Just play Fable 2. Fable 2 is undeniably a much better game than Fable 1. It ended up fixing a lot of things and expanding things out and whatnot. I certainly don't think Fable 2 is enough of a leap forward for it to be considered a great game, but there's that. Now, I do want to say, and I found this very interesting. I mentioned it before about the reviews, is that everybody was saying the same things that I was saying, more or less. Everything is very surface level. Everything's very flat. A lot of your stuff is kind of meaningless. Oh, but the game's still great. And I'm like, is it great or is it or are there problems with it? You can't say the game's 100 and then also by the same token say, well, a lot of the systems don't necessarily work out. There was a lot of promises not kept, and but the game's still 100. The game's still a classic. I'm like, you can't. You got to take some points off for it, right? And there were a couple of 100s. There was a lot of 80s and 90s for this game for the first one. I mean, even with the third game, which had a lot of performance problems, people still rated in the mid 80s. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. So, I don't know. But
I don't find it that crazy. I mean, Fallout 4 had a lot of glitches, and people gave that like the best game of the year. I mean, we talked about the Pip-Boy incident.
Fallout 4, worst of the series, by and far. Yeah, by and far.
You know what?
Fallout 76 notwithstanding, worst of the series.
But people thought that was like a great game. It got Game of the Year, right? From a lot of outlets that year.
But I think
a couple outlets.
But not to get too deep into Fallout. But the problem with Fallout 4, I think, was you couldn't really stretch the morality system like you could in the other ones, where you could be really good, you could be really bad, and you could be shades of gray in the middle. And you didn't always know what the right thing to do was, and that was like kind of the cool thing. In Fallout 4, you could be really good or you could be kind of snarky with your comments, and you couldn't really ultimately be evil if you wanted to be evil, and that was kind of the draw of Fallout.
I know, but I guess my point is, just because it has glitches, just because some of the levels in the systems aren't don't meet your expectations from the previous game, doesn't make it the game trash. It's still a good game, still a great game, and they took points off for it because it's not it's not listed as one of the greatest games of all time, but it's still a great game in the 80s. I would, people scored in the 80s, sort of the 90s. It's still considered a good game. Same thing with Fable, just because it may not live up to the hype or live up to the systems that other games of the time may have done better, doesn't make the game trash. It just makes the game not as good as the Knights of the Old Republic, which is touted as one of the greatest games of all time. Everybody could be up on that level.
Well, no, but it's if it was just that, it would be like a 7. But it's fundamentally there's fundamental problems, and I mentioned those in the gameplay, and those are the things. The combat is way too simplistic. There's no challenge there, and the way that the leveling up and the quest system works and all that, and yeah, it just kind of all adds up to whatever, Well, let me go ahead and say this before I give my actual review number of it, right? Because we have our 10-point scale and all that, but just kind of in general for the OG Xbox version, Metacritic score of 85, 77 positive reviews, although just about all of them mentioned a lot of negatives about the game, which is kind of interesting. Like, yes, in like a full review, maybe you would kind of mention some things and this and that, but it's very curious that every single review was like, yeah, there's some problems with it, but the game's still great. If you go to like, I don't know, Ocarina of Time or Super Mario 64 or whatever, you're gonna see in the synopsis like, yeah, this game is great, and these are the reasons why they're great. It was just kind of weird to me. But 77 positive, 9 mixed reviews, and 1 negative review. That's crazy.
But I don't understand. But I don't understand I don't understand your argument. It's a positive review. You act like it's 77 perfect scores. Anything that's like it's like, hey, I got 77 passing grades. Anything over a 65 is a passing grade. So he got a 65. So he got a 70. But he got 75.
It's not that they're 65s. It's that they're 80s to 100 for this game, and it's clearly not an 80 to 100 game. Even just reviewing it in a bubble, it's not that good of a game. It's fine. If I were to be generous, maybe like I would say it's like a 6 or a 7, maybe. But people are calling this 80 to 100, saying the game is amazing. It's okay.
It could. Yeah, but I think first of all, I'm looking at the Metacritic scores. There are a lot of between 80. I want to say 80 and 91.
Yeah.
A lot of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
High. It's not that high. It's not. Listen,
just because it's missing it was overhyped and
I'm not even bringing. That's what I'm trying to say, Dan. You're not understanding. None of that. None of that plays into my review. I'm talking about what is in the game. You're acting like they're
a 100. You're acting like they're giving like a perfect score. It could still have issues and still be an 85.
Yes, and every one of those reviews mentions that there are problems with the game. It's just I don't know. It's just kind of convenient. It's kind of
guess what? If the game is fun, the game is great. Just because it's missing something, it can be fun. Well, I don't even missing features that won't make it 100.
But that's the problem. I don't even think any of those systems are fun. They feel fun at first. You're like, oh yeah, look at this game world. I'm gonna get out there and fight some enemies, and it quickly boils down to hold L and hit X and circle around the character all the way to the final boss. And I found many reviews where people mention that specific thing, that the combat is very bland. It's not that great. I mean, I think the review that most closely aligned with my thoughts is Gerard the Completionist. He was very critical of this game as well. And I remember watching his review back in the day, and I thought he was like more hype on it, and he played the anniversary edition. He played the remake, which they fixed a lot of problems. They fixed the UI. At least they made it a lot better. The graphics are a lot better. They added a bunch of new stuff, like the DLC Lost Isle expansion or whatever is like part of that, which apparently is one of the better parts of it. I never played the ending expansion thing, which you could get for it, which they had for the original, but you know, even still, like he was echoing a lot of the same things that I was saying about it. Just not that great. But
I just want to say a passing score or a positive review is anything over 75. So
right, exactly.
Just because 77 positive reviews, you know, it could still score in the 70s or 80s, which is still a good game, a fun game. I don't know if I would say great game, but it's still a really good game. I mean, you know, the Order 1886, which we always talk about before, I don't think it's as bad as that. That game.
I don't think that game is bad. It's just over way too quickly. That was the problem with that game. I thought it was fun. I thought the shooting mechanics were like pretty good. I thought it had a good story. The environment, the storytelling, there was a lot of good stuff. People just meme on it because it's a 5-hour game, if even that. Like, it's a really quick game, you know.
It's 5 hours. But yeah, I think
people just wanted more.
I'm not going to penalize for that.
I think people wanted more with that. I think we could say the same thing for Fable. People wanted more. Well, I think you kind of can penalize it if it's a $60 game, right? Fable was a $50 game when it came out, right? Fable Anniversary, I guess, was $60 because it came out on the 360. But you know, the game is over very quickly. And this is touted as like a big, long, expansive RPG, and it's over like that.
Well, here what I still don't get your argument because it is penalized. It's not 100. It doesn't just because it's quick. I am penalizing it. It's not 100.
Well,
That's the knock I'm getting on it. Just because it's short doesn't mean it's a 6. You don't knock it that. Is it fun? Is it good? I mean, what if it was longer?
Yeah.
Like
well, if
Fable,
it was longer, that could be a little bit better. Then maybe I'd spend more time engaging with the systems. But it's got fundamental problems. Again, combat system, very basic, not engaging. All the other things add up to it. It's not just one thing about it. It's several things that they weren't great. The narrator that's constantly shouting in your ear, it's bad game design, right? Even if you're like, hey, I kind of like the simple mindless gameplay. It's kind of fun to just beat up on some guys and keep it moving, or it's not that difficult. I'll give you that. But the narrator keeps screaming in your ear that you don't have any health. And you can't turn it off unless you literally turn down the sound. And you don't want to do that because all the other sound is good. You know? No,
I get that, and you can have your own opinion on it. But I take umbrage with you taking a shot at the people who have a difference of opinion. Like it's not they're 77 positive scores. It's not 77 100s.
No,
They did penalize the game. There was only one 100 score, perfect score,
and even in that, on
the Metacritic,
and even in that 100 score, I think they even said, there's some problems with the game, but the game is still great.
But they had more fun with it than you did. They gave it more fun than you.
Know. It's just I find it.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Okay. I'm just saying it's positive, not 100. Let's clarify that. It's not like they gave it perfect score.
No, I mean, look, pull back the curtain. I'm giving it a 4, and I wanted to be fair about it because it's not terrible. Like, there's certainly.
If it's not terrible, then it's not a 4 because 4 means terrible.
Then it is terrible because I was gonna give it a 1, but I wanted to be fair.
It is the opposite of what you're saying about the people who gave it a positive score. It's not terrible. You can't say it's not terrible and then say it's a 4 because 4 means terrible. As a matter of fact, 4 means not playable. It means it's not playable.
It honestly, like, I didn't necessarily want to continue the game. Like, okay, look, when I first played it, I played it to completion. There was obviously something that was driving me through. But then at the end of the game, it felt very hollow. It didn't really, like, I felt gypped that I spent $50 and I beat the game in 2 days. Like, I wanted more out of the game. And there's no reason to go back and play the game again. You can make the argument, play the dark side. But it's the same exact thing again. You're just doing the opposite choice. It doesn't have any effect on the game world. You just get a different ending at the end of the game. So there's really no replayability, even though there's literally 4 different endings. And honestly, you could just reload the game towards the end, pray at the temple, change your alignment, and then do the thing to get the bad or the other bad or good endings. So you could just do that and then see all the content to it. So I don't know. Like again, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I could give it a 5. I don't know, but it's just all hollow at the end of the day. When I was playing it this time, I was like, wow, I really wish I was playing Knights of the Old Republic or Fallout or any other action RPG game. It's not like, oh yeah, there's nostalgia and the whatever, and like I didn't feel any of that. I don't know.
Giving it a 4 means it's unplayable. Like it's just like this game. This game is just not. What was it? Big Rigs. What was the game that was like you just can't play it? Like that game is like
Big Rigs. 4. Big Rigs is a broken game. Big Rigs is like a 0. Right? Big Rigs is not complete. Yeah, that was just trash. This is obviously not trash. It certainly is a complete game. It doesn't really. I mean, to be fair, there are some performance bugs. It did kind of get a little bit glitchy, and there were a lot of hiccups. So it could have used some more time in the hopper, too. I will say that. And I think that also applies to the remake, because the remake, there was bugs in the original game that they didn't actually fix. So even like the remake can bug out on you. So there is a bunch of that stuff. I'm kind of like putting that aside because they weren't like necessarily game breaking, and they didn't freeze up my console. The thing that did freeze my console up was my scratch disc. So, but that's on me. I had a disc with scratches, so I can't take points off for the game in that respect. But it's not. Yes, a lot of it is the game. Is the game playable? Is it is the game broken? Not broken? It's not broken. It's just none of the stuff is fun to engage with. None of it. There's no one thing that I'm like, oh yeah, this I'll come back and play it for the card game or the combat or the story. It's all just kind of I don't know. Just not great. I'm sticking with my 4, Dan. I'm sticking with my 4. And I tried to be fair about it. And there are definitely some positives in there, but I don't know. I'm good. So I will not be returning to this game. I will not be recompleting this game. I've got my fill. I'm good. And if you do want to pick this game up, it normally costs $19.99 on Luca Complete. You can get it on sale right now for $3.47. That is complete with the manual. So there you go. Now, that's mostly due to the fact that it was a game that sold really well, so there's just a lot of copies out in the wild. So if you do want to play it, there you go. It's easy enough to get in for $3.47. Give it a whirl. Maybe you'll have more fun with it than I do, but I just think there's better offerings out there. That's all. And I think on that note, that is episode 34 in the books, folks. And we want to thank you guys for listening to the show, for liking, commenting, and doing all good stuff that you guys do. If you want to interact with us, and we know that you do, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Threads at Rated G for Gamers. So, please listen, like, rate, review, and subscribe. And as always,
keep gaming.